Hello, everyone. Interesting times. Thanks for joining the live. We're going to have a discussion about the sentencing of the man who was the face of the Capitol incidents in January. I'm going to try to do this live stream without using any words that are going to trigger the YouTube algorithm to delete this video because YouTube has been sweeping across its website the past few days. I talked to two friends who got their accounts deleted or videos deleted for having a video in regards to this man, the man who is now the face of the incident at the Capitol in January, in which he wore bullhorns. Okay, or he had the bullhorn and he was also wearing bullhorn. Yeah. So get this: prosecutors yesterday, in getting him sentenced to prison, said that they admitted he wasn't violent. He didn't vandalize. He stole nothing, but they said his words were not peaceful. And for that, he deserves maximum sentencing. Now, this is stunning to me as a free speech issue. Obviously, I'm a big free speech advocate as a journalist. The whole reason I got into journalism is because I value free speech so much. And so this is something that needs to be discussed because he did get uh, a sentencing at the higher end of what was expected for his sentencing. So he's going to be in prison for about 3.5 years. Was that warranted for someone who was not violent, did not vandalize, stole nothing, but had non-peaceful words? I'm going to play the sound bites for you of what the prosecutors were saying at the sentencing yesterday to try to convince the judge to give him a more hefty sentence. And then I'm also going to play for you some of what he said as well, what Jake said as well. I'm not even going to say his full name because I want to say nothing that triggers YouTube to delete this video. This is a conversation that must be had, and it's a conversation YouTube really doesn't want to be had. To have had. So before we get into this, got to shout out the sponsor of this video, Noble Gold. Are you happily putting your life savings on the stock market right now despite the dangers? If you've been thinking about investing safer so you can retire comfortably and sleep at night, you could do worse than talk to Noble Gold experts about the tax advantages and other pluses of precious metal IRAs. Of course, you might just love uncertainty, but if you don't, you can get a free America the Beautiful solid silver 5-ounce bullion coin with any qualifying plan that you start. Call 877-646-5347 or visit noblegoldinvestments.com. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. Actually, the affiliate link in my description. Click that because it's going to help me stay as an independent journalist by partnering with awesome advertisers like Noble Gold. And hey, I know I'm invested in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. A lot of people are investing in either crypto or those precious metals right now because inflation is insane. Okay, so getting back to Jake, we'll just call him Jake, the man who's now the face of the Capitol incident in January. I want to play for you some of what prosecutors said in trying to get him the maximum sentence they could, trying to convince this Judge Lambert. I put his face on the cover of this video. He's actually a Reagan-appointed judge, but he's been pretty hard on Jake this past year as far as keeping him in solitary confinement, saying he's too dangerous to release, even though he committed no violence at the Capitol. And it turns out his friend who went to the Capitol with me, the reason I've been away from YouTube for the past couple of days, I've been doing a feature piece on this incident, and I've linked the full feature piece in my description. It's a really stunning piece where I compiled everything that the media has been censoring out. This is one of the most convoluted, twisted, censored, and manipulated stories that I've seen, which is why I wanted to tackle this topic as an independent journalist. Now I want to hit head on the stories that the media is trying to manipulate. So I interviewed his friend, and you'll see it in the piece linked in my description, which is, by the way, my first or my first Rumble upload. I just got on Rumble because YouTube would never give that piece a chance. Anyway, his friend says to me that first of all, Jake wasn't even planning to go to the Capitol, but he convinced him to. And then after, on the drive home, he hears that the FBI is looking for him, so he calls the FBI. And his friend Chadwick, who I interviewed, recorded the entire conversation, and he says that the FBI later, the FBI asked him in that call if he was planning to go back to the Capitol once he's released from jail. And on that call, Chadwick says that Jake said, "No, I can't even afford to." But then once Jake was in court, Chadwick saying that the FBI was saying we need to be harsh on this guy, not let him out on bail, because he might go back to the Capitol, even though he specifically said he wouldn't. So it was like the FBI was lying, and I guess that FBI call is going to be coming out here publicly. So stay tuned for that. Meanwhile, Jake just got sentenced. And let's just get to what the prosecution was saying, how they were trying to use his words on social media. Now, this is an issue for free speech for all of us. This is why I want to tackle this, because if the prosecution can pit someone's patriotic constitutional posts on social media against them and use them to keep that person in prison longer, that's pretty scary as an American citizen who's trying to get our country back to its constitution. When you're saying, you're writing on social media, I'm witnessing politicians who are corrupt, who are traitors. Hopefully I didn't just say trigger words for YouTube, but these are the sort of things he was writing on social media. And prosecution is now using those words to get him in prison longer. What does that say about the preservation of our Constitution? What does that say about people being able to continue boldly standing up for the preservation of the Constitution? Let's just get to the soundbite now here.
They pertain to a particular word that keeps coming up in these proceedings. That word is peaceful. It's come up in prior pleadings from defense counsel. It has come up in the letters of support for this defendant. The right to peaceably assemble is enshrined in the First Amendment to our Constitution. If the defendant had been peaceful on that day, Your Honor, he would not be here. What the government finds troubling when viewing the evidence of this case is the knowledge that the defendant's activities were anything but peaceful. In the months leading up to January 6th, the defendant posted vitriolic messages on social media encouraging his thousands of followers to expose corrupt politicians, to ID the traitors in the government, to halt their agenda, to stop the steal and end the deep state in the United States. It was not peaceful.
All right, let me know if you guys could hear that. Okay, let me see the comments here. Let me know if you could hear that. I know it's kind of hard to hear the court audio recordings. I guess this was an audio only thing, but so I actually bleeped out some of the keywords she was saying there because I don't want to get triggered by the YouTube bots. But she was saying, you know, he was calling on his social media followers to stop the theft and end the deep province. Anyway, so you know what he's saying there. He's trying to end the corruption in our government. By the way, all of his social media accounts got obliterated on January 6th. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, everyone deplatformed Jake so that all of his posts that he was making about stopping the theft in regards to our election was taken down. And his entire voice was muted online. Then rumors started about him being Antifa or Black Lives Matter or some sort of plant. And now, right now, there's still, to this day, a ton of people on the right who think this guy is a plant who's out to get them when I've studied this case closely. He's one of the most patriotic Americans I've ever seen, but he has some weird eccentric views that throw a lot of people for a loop. So it's pretty sad. He's like on this island now where people on the left and right don't like him. But here this prosecutor is saying that because he was trying to get the word out to his followers on social media about government corruption, that he now deserves a longer prison sentence. That is pretty stunning. That is if the judge is falling for that, which he appears to, because he just gave Jake 41 months in prison. That's what he was sentenced to yesterday, followed by 36 months of supervised release. And he just spent 317 days in solitary confinement. So if someone is being targeted for that, is scary for free speech. We need to protect free speech. If you're saying, what he was convicted of was obstructing an official proceeding, basically because he was in the crowd that scared senators away from certifying the election. He participated in the obstruction of an official proceeding. Okay, how about you just stick to that instead of jumping into his spoken and written words, because she gets into his spoken words too. And she even talked about his outfit, these are all forms of speech protected by the First Amendment. The fact that because you're talking about your concerns about government corruption on social media months before this thing happened, that gives you more time in prison. These are scary times for our country. I'm literally witnessing the erosion of free speech like I've never thought I would in my lifetime. And these need to be things that are spoken about. I mean, we need all Americans to realize how slippery this slope is that we are going down in regards to kicking out free speech. Basically, you're not allowed to criticize our government, or we'll find a way to get you in prison for as long as possible. That's the message that she's sending here. And proudly, she really goes on about it. So I'm going to play more clips from her, but I want to show you the clip that she showed in court to help encourage the judge to sentence this guy to a longer prison sentence. She plays the clip of when he first entered the Capitol. And she's on this diatribe about peace because, he was peaceful, because he didn't commit violence, right? Well, he was non-peaceful in this way, in this way, in this way. Mainly, she says his words were non-peaceful, but also in the way that he entered the Capitol, she also felt was non-peaceful and deserved a longer prison sentence. So let's play the clip that she played at the sentencing. So you see there, the door was actually open before you see the guy with the horns go through it. So there's a group of people going through the door. Someone goes through the door before him. The door's already open. He goes through the door. He didn't break through a window. Although previously in that video, there was someone breaking through a window, even though there's an open door right next to him. It seemed like people were trying to create as many openings as possible to get more people into the Capitol. But anyways, Jake went through an open door. But this all harkens back to that argument of like, stay away from people who are criminals, because if you're associated with them or around them, you're going to get walloped with the same sort of charges that they're getting. So Jake, because of his outfit and because of his media publicity, he's been made the face of this. And the prosecutors talked about this. They said that basically because he was the face of it, he needs to be an example, and he needs to be in prison for a long time to encourage other people to not do things like this. So even though he didn't do violent things, in fact, there was a Capitol protester who was just sentenced to a shorter amount of time, according to media reports, even though that man punched an officer in the face. So because that man was not didn't have as many headlines about him, even though he was violent against an officer, he gets a lower sentence than this guy who was the face of this protest or riot. So she's using this video that actually proves that Jake did not. You watch the video. Yeah, it's loud. You hear people yelling, but you see him kind of slowly walking through amidst a crowd. And so she's saying that the way that he walked into the Capitol was not peaceful. Then you actually see a man run into the break room, and Jake chases him in and says, "Hey, hey, hey." Later in a CBS interview, Jake said he was stopping that man from stealing muffins from the break room. And the prosecutor, you'll hear the soundbite, goes on to say, yeah, Jake didn't steal anything. And apparently he was stopping people from stealing stuff in the Capitol, yet he deserves the longest sentence because his words were so unpeaceful. This is an attack on our First Amendment, if you ask me. The way that this prosecutor was trying to get this guy in prison for as long as possible because of his words. Let's play the next clip.
And the government will not deny that this defendant did not assault any law enforcement officers, did not steal any property, did not destroy anything on the grounds that day as many others did. That alone does not a peaceful person make. These moments, screaming, asking for the lawmaker, time is up. In the gallery of the Senate, really says all we need to know about the peacefulness of that day.
I think it to be fair, at the time, the government has no evidence, but at the time he wrote that note to the vice president that your time is coming, the government has no evidence that he knew that noose was hanging outside. The hangman's noose had been constructed outside the Capitol.
We have no evidence.
There's no evidence that he had participated in putting that up.
We have no evidence of that, Your Honors.
But that makes that even more difficult.
So the judge is saying this is more difficult because he really doesn't know what Jake's letter written at Mike Pence's desk means. Jake's little note he scrawled, which I'm about to show you a video clip of that. Apparently someone hung a noose outside, and there's no evidence that Jake knew about that noose or had any connection. In fact, there's no evidence of actually knowing what Jake meant by the vague note that he wrote in the Senate chamber. But because he was asking for the senators and saying time is up, the prosecutor says, he is considered non-peaceful and therefore deserves a longer prison sentence. There were some serious anomalies and questions that many Americans had. I was analyzed, looked at evidence that Fox refused to publish in regards to the election. So I know firsthand about media suppressing what is going on with elections. I also know that there were a lot of lawsuits filed in regards to the election, and every single one of the judges found a technicality to kick the lawsuit out. It had nothing to do with the actual evidence. They figured out a way to say, I don't want to deal with this because maybe it'll lead to riots or something. So I'm just not even going to mess with this lawsuit. So every single election related lawsuit in December leading up to January was getting kicked out for just rogue, random reasons, not legitimate reasons. The Supreme Court refused to look at the lawsuits that a list of states had filed in regards to violations of election code. And so here all these Americans are they're beginning to divert to alternative social media and ways of communicating and sharing information about the election, as we're seeing this onslaught of censorship like we'd never seen before. And so certain Americans are really actually seeing this evidence, the same sort of evidence that I had directly from Secretary of State, showing that these, I'm going to call them anomalies in the election, are real and are being aggressively ignored by the media and aggressively ignored by the courts. And so there's certain people with really legitimate concerns about all this. And we as Americans have a right to voice our alarm when we see our elected officials that we elected to uphold the Constitution apparently deciding that they don't want to do their job after all. And we do, under the First Amendment, have the right to peacefully assemble and petition our government for redress of grievances. And yet this prosecutor is saying if we do that, she's going to find a way to have us in jail for longer. Okay. It does appear that Jake, in being in that crowd, that whoever initially sounded the alarm to senators, because Jake did not make his way into the Senate chamber until I think the prosecutor said 3 p.m., which is a long hour. That's hours after senators evacuated, as I recall. So senators had been long gone from there, and Jake moseys in. There's video of him first entering the Senate chambers. He's accompanied by Capitol Police Officer Keith Robichaud, by the way. Yeah, I got that guy's name and everything. He was apparently being escorted by Officer Keith Robichaud for quite a ways. I have multiple videos of Jake hanging out with this officer and taking this officer's orders about peace, and Jake actually yelling to the crowd to be peaceful. So some of the things this prosecutor is about to say here are really freaking alarming to me, because she's actually lying. She's lying about Jake not obeying officers' orders. And the fact that Jake didn't even get a trial before he gets shipped off to prison, which that's all on Jake, because he decided to take a plea deal. So he pled guilty to obstruction. So because he was in that crowd that led to some sort of alarm that, hey, it seems like someone's breaking in, so we should evacuate. That was obstruction of an official proceeding. So that is what he ended up being guilty of. But so he said, yeah, I am guilty of that. But the fact that he doesn't get a trial, then, because he's saying, yeah, I'm guilty. And a lot of reasons a lot of people take plea deals is because it actually usually leads to a lesser sentence. Because if you take a big risk if you go to trial, because if you lose it at trial, you can get a much higher sentence. He could have gotten potentially up to 20 years, which would be really absurd, because there's greater things in obstructing. Obstructing an official proceeding, you really have to do some crazy obstruction involving something physical to get 20 years typically. Although with the way that they seem to be kind of doing this guy dirty, he could have risked 20 years. So I think that's why he decided, let me just do the plea deal. But that robs him of the chance to really go over the evidence in a court of law. So this sentencing was just kind of like a mini trial of like, okay, let's throw the evidence out here and try to get him his highest sentence and possible. And then he spoke. He was allowed to do a little testimony to try to reduce his sentencing, and then the judge ended up making his decision. Now, the prosecution actually wanted a 51-month sentence, and the judge decided on 41 months. So I think what Jake said actually had some sway on the judge. Jake actually gave a pretty powerful speech, which I'm going to play some of it for you, but it was just, he spoke for 20 or so minutes and kind of poured his heart out to the judge. So I'm going to play some of that for you guys. But I want to wrap up what I was saying about the prosecution and play what what she's getting at with this, they're talking about Jake's note that he wrote apparently to Pence, but both the prosecution and the judge admit, yeah, we have no idea what he meant by that note, because it kind of sounded like a vague threat. So that also is non-peaceful speech. So therefore, he deserves more sentence time. Let's look at this. I'm going to play you a segment of my independent report I just put out on this case, and my interview with his friend that he went to DC with about what he's saying Jake really meant. And what we have to get here is nobody knows what he really meant. It was not an explicit threat of violence, which terroristic threatening is a crime, is a chargeable crime. But the discussion of this note also was part of the argument to give him more time in prison, which is, again, I consider another attack on free speech. Let's see. Here it is.
It's only a matter of time. Justice is coming.
What sort of message was Jake actually trying to send to Mike Pence?
It wasn't a message to Mike Pence, okay?
Well,
the message that was on Mike Pence's paper was not a message to Mike Pence. But it was a message to everybody in that building. It was a message to everybody in this country and everybody in this world. It's a spiritual promise, okay? It's only a matter of time. Justice is coming. God wins. What does he hold on a sign? God wins.
Well, that sounds peaceful if God wins. So that's the argument on Jake's side. So here's where we have to harken back to free speech and allow free speech to win. That's what needs to win, is free speech, because one side is going to say that they are very peaceful in their words, and another side is going to say they're not peaceful in their words. But stripping people of their words is the most hurtful thing you can do to human liberty. If you look at history, taking away free speech always leads to extreme tyranny. Okay, so let's not do that. And what the I feel like the precedent the prosecution set yesterday that nobody's talking about, and the prosecutor admitted, like, this is kind of an unprecedented situation with this capital thing. And his particular sentencing is kind of unprecedented. And yeah, no joke. And the way that she attacked free speech was kind of unprecedented. It should alarm every American, that she's basically setting this precedent for any protester. Now, granted, he did go into an area where an official proceeding was supposed to be happening in peace. Okay, and he admitted to obstructing an official proceeding. But the way that she's attacking everything he did outside of that, which was his speech, all of his written and spoken and words, and even the outfit he wore and what he wrote, that is not something that should lead to a higher sentence, because none of what he wrote and said that I could see was an act of organizing an obstructive activity. From everything I can tell, and I include a lot of video in my independent report that I put out yesterday, linked in description, that show video that's been highly censored, including police ushering these people into the building, not only waving them in, but you're seeing doors that are open. You're also seeing police kind of directing people in the hallways. You're seeing Jake enter the Senate chamber with a cop, and his friends talking about their respect for police, and the fact that police were facilitating this. I am left to wonder how many people were really obstructing and how many people were misunderstanding, because police were giving them the wrong signals. Police were not saying don't do certain things. Police were saying you can do these things if you're peaceful. In one sound that I show, and the police are walking in with these guys and saying, "Yeah, is there any way that you could kind of make your way out?" But if you don't, that's okay. Oh, you're not ready yet. You're not ready to leave Mike Pence's seat yet. Okay, then I'll just stand here. That's what the officers are doing. So does this man really know he's obstructing, or is he being led into a trap? That's what we're left to wonder. And had this thing actually gone to trial and allowed all the public to see it, maybe it would have come to a different conclusion. But that was a high stakes risk for Jake, because he could, if had he lost that trial, he could have spent up to 20 years in prison. So this plea deal gives him a lesser sentence. Now he's scheduled to be out. If you subtract the 317 days of solitary confinement he's already had, he's scheduled to be out of prison summer of 2024, if my math is right. So let's go on. They talk a little bit more about, the judge and the prosecutor talk more about this note, and the prosecutor continues her assault on free speech.
What was meant by what he wrote there is still a big problem.
It is, Your Honor, and it is especially when you know the timing of the day. So the defendant enters the Senate at approximately 3 p.m. All the videos that we have submitted to the court for that show that he was on the ground at least an hour before that with those members of the mob. We know what those people were chanting. We know that this defendant was using his bullhorn to incite the crowd. We know the tenor of what was going on that day. And I think we can use that context and apply it to that note, especially given, and the government did not play this portion of the video, but before that note happened, the defendant takes the dais and says, excuse my language, that Mike Pence is a fucking traitor.
Yeah, he called Mike Pence a traitor. So therefore, he deserves more time in prison. After witnessing evidence, because Jake is someone who was obsessed with the election. So he's one of those people who was digging up the election related evidence that the media was aggressively suppressing, because it's out there. You just have to look. And so the fact that Mike Pence doesn't want to really challenge the election results, Jake considered that being a traitor. And this prosecutor is assaulting his free speech right by saying that he deserves more time in prison for calling one of our elected officials a traitor after that elected official, did something that a lot of people did consider to be the actions of a traitor. A lot of people were stunned at what they saw with our government this past year. And it just, in putting together this special report, where I cut through all of the propaganda that I've never seen such a convoluted narrative. Link in description for my full 15. It's a 15-minute report on what the heck is really going on with this guy, Jake, now the face of the incident at the Capitol in January. But really going through the case over the past year, it was just like crazy to me how much the media primarily and a lot of people just made the people who went to the Capitol in January out to be nutcases, just crazy waggos. So the people who, in anyone who is extremely patriotic, who basically is really concerned about some of the things that we're seeing, and asking, is this constitutional? And someone who's bold enough to stand up and say, I'm not gonna give an inch, I'm gonna preserve my individual liberty, is being bullied and actually called just absolutely crazy. What's stunning to me is Jake got this attorney reached out to him, and he decided to go with this guy. And this attorney is extremely anti-Trump and anti-Trump supporters, as it turns out, which is like, Jake's a huge Trump supporter. So it's like, why did you choose that guy as your attorney? He probably didn't know at the time, but now he's deep into the case. And he's got this attorney this summer on CNN calling Jake and every Trump supporter who went to the Capitol in January saying that they have brain damage and that and all these things about their mental abilities, and it's just like, wow, calling them autistic. It was like, you got to be kidding me. But that was the whole vibe the media was putting out too, and I think it worked. It worked for a lot of Trump supporters. Sadly, I think a lot of people who went to the Capitol in January, they were ashamed that they did. Which is a crying shame. Everyone needs to man up, woman up, and stop caring what other people think. Stop caring about the media bullying them. Like, of course the media is going to bully you. Who cares? Everyone's got to toughen up and stop caring what people think. Look, when I called out Fox for its corruption this summer, you better believe I was bullied. There were ridiculous, stupid headlines about me. I was made to look ridiculous by some people, and I don't care. Of course, they are going to write that about me. I left the media cult. The media is a cult, and you need to stop falling for any of their headlines, you guys. Always stand up for freedom, always. And who cares about these wackos who think that's not acceptable? Stand up for freedom. Let me check your comments here. I want to you're saying the autistic know better than the left. Oops. The autistic know better than the left. Wow. Yeah, so everyone's wielding insults at each other, and everyone should stop caring what people think and stand up for what's right. Okay. Of course, they're going to say stupid things about you. Don't be ashamed about what you believe in. Okay? It's wonderful to care about freedom and your country. And what I've seen going back over this past year and how they covered this stuff in January, it's crazy. And one of the guys who went to the Capitol ended up committing suicide. At least one of them. He went back home and committed suicide after he saw all the headlines and whatnot. And it's just a crying shame. Like, never let someone bully you out of standing up for freedom. That's the most wonderful thing to stand up for. So I want to get into what Jake said. I want to play some of that for you. So by the way, all these sound bites are from the Liberty Report on YouTube. Shout out to Liberty Report. This is actually the YouTube of Jake's friend, and he just got another strike because of a video about Jake. Let me see if I can bring up. Is this it? Yeah. Okay, so this is Jake. He starts his testimony to the judge to try to get his sentence lowered. And he starts out by thanking the judge for giving him that organic diet that got so many headlines. And the judge is like, yeah, you're welcome, because I got a lot of flack for that. All right. Hopefully you can hear it.
Mr. Jensen, my humblest regards, Your Honor. Seriously, I want to start by saying I really wish I would have met a man of your honor and stature under far different circumstances, to say the least. And thank you for service to our military, our Constitution, and our federal court system. Also, thank you for the court order of organic diet while I was in solitary. It did wonders for me.
That took a lot of time, didn't it?
God bless you for it. Seriously, thank you. It made all the difference. I'd also like to say that I'm going to be as upfront with Your Honor as I was upfront with the FBI, with the prosecution, and with the doctor in Colorado. And I'd also like to start with a quote from Max Dupree. The quote goes something like, you can help yourself understand problems by asking yourself questions. That's a quote. And to understand my predicament, while I was in solitary, I asked myself a lot of questions. But I think the most important question I asked myself was, what would Jesus do? And I followed that up with, what would Gandhi do in this situation? And the truth of the matter is, I came to the conclusion that Jesus would love, understand, and respect everybody involved in this court proceeding. And that would result in his acceptance of responsibility, no matter what the consequence. And Gandhi, who viewed God as truth and truth as God, would allow his loyalty to God and to truth to guide him to accepting responsibility, even and especially when it incriminated. As I implemented this strategy, because I look up to these men, I look up to Gandhi, I look up to Jesus. You know, I want to mirror their character as much as I can. Part of the reason why, you know, looking at the videos. So I tried to remain objective and impartial. And in the process of being objective and impartial, I was blessed with hearing quote from, of all people, Clarence Thomas, Justice Clarence Thomas. I actually admire him quite a lot as well. And he likened being a Supreme Court justice to being a referee on a football field. And he said that, you know, if you make a ruling on the field that causes the people's favorite team to lose, well, then the people are in an uproar, and they say that the referee should be fired and he's blind. But if the referee makes a call and a ruling on the field that people like and makes their team win, well, and all of a sudden the referee is deserving of praise and is to be promoted and, you know, glorified. And so when I heard that, I thought to myself, well, you know what? If I'm going to remain objective and impartial, then I need to put myself in their honor shoes. I have to put myself in their shoes. I have to put myself in the prosecution shoes. I have to put myself in the shoes of everybody that saw the coverage, shall we say, in the media and saw my image from their subjective perspective without knowing. And so if I'm asking Your Honor to be impartial, I need to be impartial too. I have to look at this situation from a third-party perspective, not looking at it from Jake's perspective. I believe in freedom. I believe in freedom with all of my heart and soul. It's why I joined the military. I support the Constitution. I support this country. Every fiber of my being. I'm willing to die for it, much like yourself, which God bless you. You know, your time serves you mom. But I also believe in law and order, because without freedom and without law and order, you can't have freedom. And in order for freedom and law and order to coexist, freedom has to be exercised with accountability and responsibility. Those things have to be practiced in tandem with freedom. Otherwise, I mean, what's the point? If the law is broken and there's no punitive action, then there's no point in having the law. It's anarchy. So I had to come to terms with the fact that I was in solitary confinement because of me, because of my decision. I broke the law. And if I believe in freedom, if I believe in law and order, if I believe in responsibility and accountability, then that means that I should do what Gandhi would do and take responsibility, even and especially when it incriminates. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's what men of honor do.
Yeah, cut out there. Anyway, he goes on. Let me link this in my description so that you can watch the whole thing, because it was a pretty powerful speech he did. For some reason, it cut out in the middle of his testimony for a while, and I was like, "Is this a conspiracy?" And then it came back. But he gave a great speech. He made some great comments, and he like showered the judge with love. And the judge was like, "Oh my gosh, you're on such a positive path, Jake. But because of the seriousness of your crime, I can't really give you a break." But the judge did give him a little break compared to what the prosecution wanted. The prosecution wanted 51 months. The judge ended up giving him 41 months in prison, minus the 317 days in solitary confinement, adding on 36 months of supervised release. Anyways, he'll be out of prison summer of 2024, allegedly. Yeah, the judge literally said the seriousness of the crime. I see you guys commenting here. Yeah, because the official proceeding that he obstructed was a very, very important one, the certification of the election. I think that's what really was involved here. It was really interesting when you watch all the videos of Jake that he was not aware of the amount of chaos. I think the side of the Capitol he was on, from what I'm gathering, what happened at the Capitol was that one side, like it looked like the front of the Capitol was fairly peaceful, and then the back of the Capitol was where the biggest chaos was happening. And I think Jake was on the more peaceful side. I know some people were breaking windows on his side, but the side that Ashley Babbitt was killed on was the opposite side. He had no idea at 5 p.m. when he was hanging out in the street. He still had no idea that someone had died. So that's what I've gathered. So anyway, I think it's just interesting. Obviously, this was a huge mixed bag of like a lot of people, and not everyone was on the same page. There's plenty of evidence out there of real Black Lives Matter / Antifa activists going in there just to be instigators. The one guy actually filmed Ashley Babbitt's death. He has a very popular YouTube video out where he filmed like straight up 40 minutes worth of breaking into the Capitol and encountering Ashley Babbitt. It's a pretty, it was honestly like one of the heaviest YouTube videos I've ever watched. Just his raw video. I think he had the video strapped onto his forehead, and he was pretending to be a Trump supporter, but he was a Trump hater. There's videos of him out there. I wish I could remember his name right now, but there's headlines about this guy. So he was specifically there as an instigator. And goes in, films it. It was such a heavy vibe. I like had to take a break from the YouTube video watching it. It was just like such a dark energy. It was really sad. So there was a lot of darkness at the Capitol there. There was a huge mix of a lot of things. So it's a confusing case, and the media has just spun it to no end. And I just wanted to address some things with free speech that I think we really need to take seriously. I really think. Anyway, go follow Liberty Report on YouTube. They're great. Like I said, that's one of Jake's friends that I interviewed. His friend who he went to the Capitol with. That's his YouTube. We need to preserve free speech extremely aggressively. We cannot just roll over and be like, okay, it's okay to watch one guy get shipped off to prison for years because of the words he spoke. The prosecution used his words as the evidence, which were not words saying, let's obstruct Congress. That's not what he was saying. His words were saying he thinks that our congressional leaders have become traitors. And those are words that are protected under the First Amendment. Especially when there's freaking evidence to back it up. It's being suppressed. It's true. Don't delete me, YouTube. I think I've done a good job of avoiding. Oh, John Sullivan. There we go. Avoiding trigger words today. Here we go. John Sullivan is the instigator from BLM / Antifa who went in there pretending to be a Trump supporter, filming it all. Go look him up. There's videos of him basically saying we need to take down Trump and all this. So just be aware of all that. This is stuff that people. Oh yeah, this is his nickname too. You can Google both of those names. He's one of the instigators that was at the Capitol, who was not a Trump supporter. But let me just say, that does not negate the fact that there are Trump supporters who are ready for violence. They're out there. Okay, we're getting to a crazy tipping point right now in our country that I am not going to act like isn't happening. It's the truth. And I think there were Trump supporters there that day who were ready, to rock and roll. I've heard from them. You guys, I'm a journalist. I hear from people on all sides, guys. I know BLM people. I know a lot of people. And I have talked to people who want to do something about the direction that our country's going in a very aggressive way if need be. And it actually reminds me of the American Revolution when England was enacting its tyranny more and more. Americans spent a decade saying, hey, Britain, back off, like stop being tyrannical with us. It wasn't just the taxes, but they were jailing people. One time, a redcoat killed a guy who shouldn't have been killed. They're arresting people that the Americans are like, you do not deserve to be arrested. I mean, it almost reminds me of the situation with Jake. He got arrested, and a lot of people, and all of the January 6 people, a lot of the January 6 people, a lot of Americans believe do not deserve to be arrested. So those Americans see it as tyranny the same way as the original Americans in 1775 saw the British tyranny when the British went to arrest their guys. And it was actually the arrest of one guy that led to the first gunfire in the American Revolution that led to the foundation of the United States. Fun fact. Anyway, I've said some very controversial things tonight. And I hope you guys have a wonderful night and continue standing up boldly for freedom and for the American Constitution and for free speech. As a journalist, I can't be a journalist without free speech. Every journalist should be boldly standing up for free speech, and I sure am going to. And I'm not going to be ashamed about this freedom that we have that allows us to have a free press. Okay. And I'm appalled that other journalists don't feel the same. Never be bullied for what you believe. And finally, that wraps it up. You guys can support my journalism as well as protect your food supply by hitting the link in my description for My Patriot Supply, which is another one of the sponsors of my independent journalism. They're actually the first people who signed on as a sponsor with me, which was wonderful. I love all the companies who want to support my independent journalism. So go hit the My Patriot Supply link in my description, get stocked up on your food storage, and support independent journalism while you're doing it. You're saying any t-shirts from me? Not yet, but I'm figuring out the merch thing. I got a lot to figure out. I'm just getting started with this thing. I just broke away from Fox, guys. Give me some time. It's been hard to figure it all out. All right, I'm going to have merch soon. It's going to be pretty cool. All right, we'll talk to you guys later. Have a great one. Keep being you.